Welcome to the Boxing Source Midweek Report, where we tackle the latest topics in the sport of boxing here up to this point every single Wednesday. Time to start the show. Yeah, we're starting the show here. That's right. We are having the late edition of the Boxing Source Midweek Report. Yeah, that's right. We are checking in here live. What is going on, everybody? It is around 11:37 p.m. Eastern time. And we are here with the Boston Source Midweek Report. I had to get to all the stuff that's going on this week. There is a big week, of course, in San Antonio, Texas. We got the fight card that is at the Frostbank Center there in San Antonio. And you got to touch on a couple of things involving that particular fight card. But of course, what went down earlier today when it came to the World Boxing Council and Terence Allen Crawford. So, I had to have him take on this, give a whole thing as far as like a backstory or whatever it is or whatnot. And kind of, go through a number of things when it comes to this because with what Terence Crawford said, it makes things like be huge in the landscape of boxing, or it could be huge when it comes to the landscape of boxing and how things could shape itself out when it comes to the sanctioning bodies, not just the WBC, but everyone else that's involved. Now, I'm going to, take the time to go over the live that Terence Crawford had earlier today. I'm going to play a clip. Got to play the clip. Got to go through the whole thing or whatever it is. So I'm going to have this thing queued up. Hopefully, I'll play as much of it as I can, and then just get through most of what's going down on there. So this is what I'm gonna have here. Should be able to cue it up or play it. So let's see. I'm gonna hit the button, and it's gonna play. So let's run it.
Man. Listen. I got something to say. I got a lot to say. What's up, though, everyone? I'm gonna say that first and foremost. I'm gonna just say what's up. But I gotta dive right into it. I see Mauricio, got a lot to say about me not paying him $300,000 plus another $100K something for sanction fees, right? Then he gonna tell me I ain't even apologize. Like, who the fuck you think I am? Boy, you better slap your fucking self. Paying your ass shit. Fuck you talking about pay you $300,000. What makes you so motherfucking better than any of the other sanctioned bodies? Huh? Answer that question. What makes you better than the WBO, the IBF, or the WBA? Everybody accepted what I was giving them. But you, the WBC, think that you better than everybody, don't you? So since you, the WBC, and you got the fucking green belt, which don't mean fucking shit. The fucking real belt is the ring belt, which is free, motherfucker. What are you talking about? You want me to pay you more than the other sanctioned bodies because you feel like you better than them. How in the world all the sanctioned bodies agreed to the same amount, but you sit your motherfucking ass up there and say that I need to apologize to you? The fuck? You can take the fucking belt. It's a trophy anyway. The fuck am I paying you every time I step foot in the fucking ring? Gonna fucking wear down as the years pass. That don't even make sense. I'm the motherfucker that's putting my life on the line, not you. You ain't stepping your motherfucking ass in that ring. You were nobody else. You were nobody else. So why should I have to pay to carry your belt? You should be paying me. If you want to be truthful, you should be paying me. I don't see it. It irks my nerves how this dude gets on a plane, gets a hotel suite. Him and his buddies, they go out to dinner, 5-star meals, all that, you know, and guess who got to pay for it? Us fighters. We paying for y'all to come out here, have the time of y'all life, stay in the best hotels of y'all life, and it's all done on our dime. It's done on our dime. Do that sound right to y'all? It's crazy, ain't it?
Wow.
We the one out there getting battered, knocked upside our head, and every time we step foot in the ring, we gotta pay them a sanction fee like they the government. We getting taxed. It's crazy. Then he said, allegedly, I made X amount of money. You don't know how much I made. You don't know how much I made. Once again, you're speculating. You're speculating. So listen, Mauricio, I appreciate you. I appreciate you. Because everybody in the world know you was going for Canelo. You was mad that I beat Canelo. It's okay. It happens, you know? But if you a real fan of the sport, you would have, you know, said congratulations instead of having that little smirk on your face, all mad and pouting. But listen, though.
What's going on, L-Dub?
You should have took the money. Y'all. And you should have been thankful and grateful that I was rocking your belt around as your champion.
All right, yo, I gotta put a whole halt to that, man. What's going on, L-Dub? What's good with you? Yeah, this is a late edition of the Midweek Report. First up on the docket, talk about this thing here with Terence Crawford, of course, who won the undisputed super middleweight championship over, as I say, Santoso Alvarez Barragan, man. And, now you have this whole thing that's going on when it comes to these belts and sanctioning fees and how much these fighters got to pay for sanctioning fees and stuff like that. So, L-Dub, you know how I go with that, especially when you're a unified or undisputed champion. So apparently this thing here with Terence Crawford and the WBC, I guess, wants a bigger percentage of the purse that Terence Crawford got for becoming the undisputed super middleweight champion of the world. And to me, this kind of like reminds me of something that happened over 10 years ago. I posted this on my personal Twitter page or whatever it is. But it reminds me of when Miguel Cotto was going to face Canelo Alvarez, and he was a WBC middleweight champion. Now, before he was going to face Canelo Alvarez, he was required to pay the WBC in excess amount of money because there was a mandatory challenger there in Gennady Golovkin. Now, after you had Miguel Cotto kind of like honor that, right? He pays the money to have to step aside in order for the fight with Canelo to take place. Then the WBC said, not only did you have to pay this for a step aside fee, but we want a percentage of the purse for you being the WBC champion. And at that time, Miguel Cotto was like, man, you know what? Nah, fuck that. I ain't paying that extra money. y'all had me paying all this money here just off me not fighting Gennady Golovkin. And now I got to pay a little bit extra just because I'm fighting Canelo Alvarez? No, no, no. I'm good on that. I'm good on that. I'm keeping that. I'm keeping that $300,000. So kept that money, ended up losing by decision. Canelo gets that WBC belt, and soon after that, we all know what happened. They, activated the mandatory, and Canelo said, "Bump you to the WBC," and kind of like just the belt. And see, what happened right there was that kind of like got the WBC in a tizzy because they're like, oh, well, if Canelo doesn't want the belt and we're going to have Golovkin with the belt, then that, makes the overall value of sorts or whatever it is go down a little bit or go down fairly significantly because we knew at the time Golovkin was not as popular as Canelo. So they had to kind of like make their little adjustments of sorts or whatever it is. And then we all seen what's happened in the history between the WBC and Canelo Alvarez. And, with this Crawford video, like he went, on with that video. And yeah, yeah. And, he went on with that video and he said the whole thing as far as like, you know, Canelo not honoring the mandatory and, how they had the whole thing with him and Benavidez. And it was funny that Crawford brought that up because, hey, if it wasn't for the whole thing there with Benavidez, hey, Terence Crawford probably wouldn't have had the opportunity to fight for the undisputed super middleweight championships. But hey, regardless of all of that, he still, brought it up and stuff like that. So now you have, Terence Crawford saying what he's saying there in reference to the WBC and given his stature, given him, being the guy that has basically been the best fighter of this era, that could really affect things. You know what I mean? He said, Adam said, Lisa Baumgartner was just live on Nightcap. Oh, okay. She was on there with Shannon Sharp and Chad Javon Ocho Cinco. Yeah. So you know that, Chad been on the thing there for boxing and stuff like that. Like I saw him, that was after the weigh-in for Canelo versus Crawford. So he's, kind of like been, there talk about the sport too. But speaking of Alicia Baumgartner, hey, in the WBC, how about that one? Because remember, you got Alicia Baumgartner that's having her upcoming fight in less than a couple weeks from now, and she's supposed to be the undisputed champion. But since she wants to fight, 12 3-minute rounds, and the WBC is against that, the WBC belt is not on the line in that particular fight. So this is like all this stuff going on with the WBC. Whole thing with Terence Crawford. They got another thing that's out there when it comes to the super lightweight division, and I'm not talking about the interim WBC belt. I'm talking about the actual WBC belt, right? Because they had made a decision in reference to Subriel Matias. Okay, so we're gonna get into that too. But back to this thing here with Terence Crawford, and like I said, all the stuff that the WBC has been doing, particularly over the last couple of months or the last few months, y'all seen the whole thing as far as like, let's say for example, you had the fight with Beterbiev and Bivol, the rematch that was this year, right? And Bivol wins the rematch. Bivol is at the time the undisputed champion at light heavyweight. You had the WBC having the mandatory being David Benavidez, right? And then you had Turkey Al-Sheikh saying what he was saying in reference to all of that and saying, no, we ain't going to have Bivol fighting Benavidez. At the time, we want that third fight between Bivol and Beterbiev. So you had the WBC versus Turkey Al-Sheikh then, right? And then fast forward to September, and I don't know if you know, like if you hear L Dub, but you remember the whole thing going into that fight week that people weren't sure that you would have all of the sanctioning bodies there present in the ring for when they had the whole thing going on with the undisputed world championship. They just said, "Hey, we're gonna have Ring Magazine, and the Ring thing is gonna trump everything else. And if y'all ain't down with it, you shouldn't show up." But you still had Mauricio Suleiman out there. He was there at the what was that? The or the Mandalay Bay, or was it MGM Grand? I think it was like MGM Grand. You know, he had like a whole thing that was going on. You know, with the folks in the media. You know, I was out there with it. Like he was giving out like one of these like it's like a golden type yo a boxing mitt. He had like something like that, and then we had the shirt for the fight. You know what I mean? So y'all see that like out there, and you see how it has like WBC on it and all that type of stuff, right? So I'm like this whole thing with the WBC and Terence Crawford, I think is gonna be a huge deal. I feel like it's going to be a huge deal because, we've had some stuff in the past where fighters will talk about, hey, how come we gotta, pay these fees like after every single fight, or, paying these percentages and all that type of stuff. And we don't, hey, as Errol Spence was talking about, we don't know where it's going. We don't know what it's being put towards or anything like that. And that's the thing that Terence Crawford was talking about, saying that, hey, these guys are going to the all the big hotels and having these lavish dinners and all this type of stuff and flying all over the place, flying everywhere. And what else is going on with the money? So he's like, you know what? As far as like this right here, y'all could go ahead and keep that belt. And so if he's ended up vacating the belt, we all know that he's still rated as the number one fighter in the super middleweight division, right? Let's see what happens next year if they're going to try to angle for a rematch between Terence Crawford and Canelo Alvarez, and if that is going to involve the World Boxing Council. Now, you could have a whole thing with, Ring Magazine. If they don't, have any sanctioning fees or whatever it is, then WBC is going to lose out this time around. Are the other, sanctioning bodies going to comply? Who knows? Hey, Crawford mentioned something there with the IBF. Of course, when he was an undisputed champion of welterweight, and the IBF called for that mandatory with Jerome Boots Ennis, and he said, "Hey, I wasn't, going to do all that because I was planning on moving up, right?" But you have, all these other sanctioning bodies that kind of like cater to their rules or whatever it is. But it seems like the WBC kind of, circumvents and moves around when it comes to certain fighters, according to a number of people, right? So now with this thing here with Terence Crawford, man, I'm like, yo, this could be like absolutely insane if they, kind of like move with this and say that, hey, the WBC could end up losing out on a good amount of money if you have more fighters kind of like writing themselves off, or taking themselves out of the picture when it comes to being involved there with the World Boxing Council. You know what I mean? So that's the thing about it. Now more with the with the WBC, I talked about the whole thing there with um the what is it, the super lightweight championship. There, Subriel Matias, you have been tested positive, right? And the WBC kind of like ruled that he is quote unquote not guilty, and that he could still go forward with his fight, right? That is scheduled for what, January 10th at the Barclays Center, right? Against Dalton Smith. But with the caveat of him continuing to have the testing going on, and after that, after the fight, he's still on a stringent testing protocol afterwards. So it's not an overall good look for the WBC. And now that they had the whole thing with the ratings also that's been recently released, they also mentioned a thing there when it came to a fighter that had tested positive in the past in Conor Ben, and they're saying like Conor Ben is also rated high in the, I guess it's a welterweight division or whatever it is, but it's like absolutely crazy. What's going on at least right now with the WBC, and oh geez, it's not a good look, not a good look overall there for the WBC. But in reference to Terence Crawford, like I said, I don't really see him fighting again until probably about September of next year anyway. If he's going to have the rematch with Canelo Alvarez, then that's not going to happen until September of next year. Now he could potentially have a fight before that, but it depends on what happens in a couple of weeks, at least for me, right? So with that being said, I think we're gonna hear a lot more from both parties in reference to this. I'm gonna see. Hold up, let me also cue up something there from Crawford, because he also talked about more on it uh, on social media, right? Because we'll see like this thing here, man. Let me see where it is, right? Uh, he said, "Well, let me make things very clear. I never agreed to anything that that Mauricio Suleiman on anything, nor did my team." I'm gonna go ahead and share that thing real quick. Hold up. Let me run that here real quick, and y'all be able to see it on the screen here. So let me see what we got. I bet there it is. I never agreed to anything with Mauricio Suleiman, nor did my team. So I guess it's a message from Mauricio Suleiman saying that they inclined that he agreed to some terms when it came to keeping the WBC belt. All right. So he's saying, stop the cap with that narrative. I've always been a man of my word. Now I know that you got something with another guy within the boxing sphere talking about you paid the WBA, IBF, and WBO, but don't want to pay the WBC. You make it look bad. Come on, see, man, man, I'll be like, that dude be tripping, man. For real, he be tripping on that. Let's see here. But he also made this message here saying, let me cue this up also. Let's see. An additional thing here from Terence Crawford. He says, it's crazy that Chico Lopez had to deliver me my belt after the fight because Mauricio Suleiman was too shameful to personally give it to me himself. But I should be thanking him for a bill. Like, so I mean, this kind of like goes into the whole thing about, once you win a world title, you get to take on the fees of holding that world title. You know how they have it like 3% or 4% of your purse or something like that. Or if you're a unified or undisputed champion, then a small percentage gets taken off there for you to pay off for sanctioning fees. But when it comes to like guys like a Terence Crawford, like an Anthony Joshua, like a Canelo Alvarez, like who else could you say? Like, I mean, Errol Spence, back when he was unified champion. Like when you have popular fighters that are world champions and they have these high purses that are 10 million and up, a percentage of that goes out to these sanctioning bodies. Now you add on top of that all of the fees that they, or the percentages that they have to pay out to the promoters, to the trainers, to the managers, to chief seconds, to cutmen, to people that work in the gym with them, sparring partners, all that type of stuff. So all of that money gets taken away, and then on top of that, you still got to pay taxes. So y'all can imagine how much money gets taken out of a fighter's purse, especially if they're like a world champion. If they, like say make about $3, $4, $5 million or up. You know what I mean? So that's why I like Terence Crawford made, what said what he said. You feel me? Shout out to New Era TV in the building. What's up with you here? Like I said, I'm talking about this whole thing there with Terence Crawford, man, and He definitely had a lot to say in the live, and he followed it up with what he posted on social media. So now we just look over these next couple of days to see, what the responses are from the World Boxing Council and what he has to say about that. Now, I've, kind of like heard from some people that were around representatives of the World Boxing Council earlier today, or some would say yesterday, because they have something going on over in Thailand. So I might be able to, get some reports. I don't know if it'll be within the next few hours or something like that. But once they had like something going on over in Thailand and they heard that news, that kind of like, shook up what was going on over there. Because I think they had Alexander Usyk in attendance over there in Thailand too for whatever the WBC was doing over there. But still, this is like something that really has an effect on the sanctioning bodies and what these boxing sanctioning bodies can do when it comes to having these fighters represent them as their world champion. You know what I mean? So that's what they got on that. What else we got? Here on the docket, man. I wanted to talk about the whole thing there when it came to this upcoming card, San Antonio, Texas, Frostbank Center. Of course, as I mentioned, the interim WBC super lightweight title is on the line there with Lamont Roach Jr. versus Isaac Pitbull Cruz, right? And Pitbull Cruz is defending that world title or the WBC interim title. Now, here's the thing about it, all right? As far as like the odds are concerned, you know what I'm saying? I'm saying Lamont Roach Jr. as the favorite in these betting lines. The money line got him at ranging from -260 to like -225. Isaac Cruz is an underdog at like +190 to like +180, right? So they're kind of like looking at it as maybe the styles might not mesh up real well, for this particular fight. If I go through the tail of the tape there real quick, when it comes to these two fighters on this thing, right? You're gonna have there with Lamont Roach Jr. Of course, we had his bout with Gervonta Tank Davis there March 1st over at the Barclays Center, right? And it was a draw. A number of people, as has been mentioned many times over, felt like he should have been the one to get the win on that night, but he didn't do that. But he is there, of course, as a taller fighter, as Isaac Cruz is like pretty much 5'4". He's listed at 5'4", and they're defending the WBC interim super lightweight championship. You got Isaac Cruz at 5'4", and you got Lamont Roach Jr. at 5'7", with a reach at 68, compared to Isaac Cruz with a reach of 63 and a half. Okay. And we all know the style there of Isaac Cruz. He's there, right in front of you. He's there to, wing and try to get to the inside and duck down even lower. He's at 5'4", and he's ducking down even lower to try to get to the inside and work you and weigh you down. And so, that's what he was doing against, likes of a Rolando Romero or like a Omar Salcido or Eduardo Ramirez. But you also have like those fights that he had against Giovanni Cabrera and Jose Rayo Valenzuela, where you had, Rayo pretty much like outpoint him. He was able to get like 8 rounds on Isaac Cruz and 2 of the 3 scorecards. And the thing there with Giovanni Cabrera was that particular fight was like an absolute, was grimy, as they say. It was grimy, where you had Isaac Cruz like fouling him, getting deducted a point for headbutt and all that type of stuff, and sloppy work on the inside. And so I don't see where Isaac Cruz is polished enough to really give someone like Lamont Roach Jr. trouble, especially with the background of Lamont Roach Jr. being a decorated, fighter in the amateurs before, turning professional, having a run of victories there before having the loss that he had against Jamel Herring. But ever since then, like, Lamont Roach Jr. hasn't lost, so that's the only loss that he has on his record, so even being, we're able to win the WBA championship in the super featherweight division, challenging for the WBA championship in the lightweight division against Tank Davis, and now going for this WBC interim championship in the super lightweight division. But I mean, at the flip side, you got the thing there with Isaac Cruz that has been a world champion there within the 140-pound division, was able to, be a top rated contender in the lightweight division before, having the fights that he did have against Tank Davis. But after that, being able to build those wins up, like I said, against like a Giovanni Cabrera, Yuriorkis Gamboa, before, going up to face Rolly Romero for that WBA super lightweight title, right? So he's kind of like been in the mix. Of course, he's one of the more popular fighters out there within the lightweight or super lightweight division. And then you got here Lamont Roach Jr. that had the performance that he had against Tank Davis, and now he's going to see how he fares here against Isaac Cruz. As I said with the betting lines on that, you got the thing there with Lamont Roach being around like a minus 260. I got to see which one is that. That's on FanDuel. They got him at minus 260. All right. I'm going to see here if I could find more here on this thing here. I want to see what DraftKings is talking about when it comes to the bet lines on that, as far as like up to date, because where we at? We're at now Thursday, December 4th here in the East Coast, right? So I want to see like what they got here currently for that. I'm going to go there, unboxing here, and they got this thing for, let me see, minus 220. So they got Lamont Roach Jr. at minus 220 on DraftKings and Isaac Cruz at plus 170. All right. So you did have that. And then, of course, what was going down there for the co-feature, or supposed co-feature. We were supposed to have a unification bout in the middleweight division. We were supposed to finally have a unification bout in the middleweight division involving Erislandy Lara and Janibek Alhamdulillah. But they have Janibek, testing positive, right? Testing positive for what it was, performance enhancing drug. I don't know if it's like Medonium or whatever it is, but that was something that I was like, come on, man. That was wild. That was insane. That was just really, really bad on that, right? But now we have Erislandy Lara facing Johan Gonzalez. And because of that, that ain't going to be the co-feature bout. And we all know sometimes with Lara's style, that's like absolutely crazy. That was like, we don't know if it's the Lara that was, competing in the middleweight division or the junior middleweight division, or if it's the Erislandy Lara that's been able to, knock out Thomas Lamana within like 2 or 3 rounds or whatever it is. We don't know which version of Erislandy Lara we're going to get. We haven't seen Erislandy Lara since he's had his bout against Danny Garcia. That was like over a year ago, right? So it's like now he's going up against Johan Gonzalez, who has been in the mix with some guys that have been out there or around the middleweight division or whatever it is, but he's kind of fell short against the likes of Yoenis Tejas and Jesus Ramos there in the super welterweight division. But on March 1st, he was able to defeat Jared Hurd by decision, and that ended up being Jared Hurd's last fight there as a pro. So now he is here in position to face Erislandy Lara for the WBA middleweight title. That's crazy. But I mean, even with that, like they had the odds what it was, and that was crazy because they even had Janibek as a favorite in this bout against Erislandy Lara before he gets caught. Now I want to see what happens with all of that, especially with what I was saying there with Subriel Matias. Let's see what is going to be decided from the WBO and the IBF when it comes to Janibek having this positive test. So that's the thing that we're going to be looking at for Janibek, right? And then on the flip side for Erislandy Lara, that would have been an opportunity for him to be a unified champion, but now that's taken away. Some people were bringing up a possibility that the winner of this fight could face Terence Crawford if they were going to be a unified middleweight champion. But now that's all but taken down, all but shot down there in this matchup. But Lara versus Janibek, as far as like a matchup goes, I didn't quite like it anyway because those two styles are just not good at all. Janibek is more of like a counter puncher that will really like get to you if he sees that you're hurt, but he doesn't really press the action that much. And I already said, what I said in reference to Erislandy Lara. So that would have been really tough to get through, especially for that being a co-feature bout to Isaac Cruz versus Lamar Roach. But now Erislandy Lara is facing Johan Gonzalez, and that particular fight has been moved down one. And they're going to move up the fight between O'Shaquie Foster and Stephen Fulton. And that one, the odds are even. They're basically even for that particular matchup. Yeah, we could have had it in October, but didn't necessarily happen that way. So it was pushed here for December 6th, as the October 25th card that was supposed to be in Las Vegas got scratched because of the entry for Sebastian Fundora. You know what I mean? Shout out to Bull Rider Game 4. He says, once Victor Conte is no longer here, do you think there will be more fighters testing dirty? Whoa. Hey. Great question. Because, hey, maybe, Conte might have, knew something, how to do some things, you know what I mean? How to, take the right, supplements or whatever, or, how to, get it out of your system in a good amount of time or whatever. Hey, I don't know, man. I don't know. Shout out to Sizzling in the building. What's good with you? But yeah, that's a great question. I don't know that. Hey, maybe we could, because I gotta look into something else here, because there was supposed to be there's another fight that was on the card, right? And it was involving Elijah Garcia, and apparently the opponent that he was slated to face on this fight card was scratched because that fighter ended up testing positive for performance enhancing substance. So hey man, I don't know, maybe we could have more of these things come up. We could probably have more of these things come up here. So that's a very good thing to kind of like point out right there, in reference to Victor Conte, of course, who recently passed away and stuff like that. But hey, who knows how this thing is? But now you see how the card kind of like shapes itself out. I wanted to see here if I could pull that up actually real quick. So I'm gonna see if I could get a full card, or at least I'll be able to tell y'all the full card, right? Because it's supposed to have what is it? Daniel Blancas versus William Townsend. That's on this card. Ben Johnson, as I was mentioning, I was out there for the media workout over at the No Excuse Gym on Saturday. Yeah, Ben Johnson is going up against Josiah Gonzalez. Jordan Roach, of course, younger brother of Lamar Roach Jr. There against Brian Santiago. You're going to have like Hugo Mendez in this thing. You're going to have Robert Guerrero Jr. That's on this card. You got Adrian Neves that's on this card as well. and this is all before the whole thing with the what was it, the PBC on Prime or whatever it is that you're gonna see there Frank Martin versus Francis Barthélemy on that too. So let me see what else we have here that's on this card. I'm gonna be able to share it here on the screen here real quick. But we got a number of fights that's on this card. Y'all should be able to see it on here. You got the thing there: Isaac Cruz, Lamar Roach, Stephen Fulton, Shockey Foster, Jesus Ramos versus Shane Mosley Jr., and Erislan De Lara versus Johan Gonzalez. That is going to be on the pay-per-view portion of the card. The headliner for that PBC on Prime is Frank Martin versus Francis Barthélemy. You're going to have Isaac Lucero versus Roberto Valenzuela Jr. You're going to have Luis Nunez versus Hector Sosa. And I mentioned there with Daniel Blockus and William Townsend, Jordan Roach, and Benjamin Johnson, Robert Guerrero Jr. So that's basically the full card. Now, y'all could, check out, the Boxing Source YouTube channel. We've had conversations, with Ben Johnson, Lamont Roach Sr. We had the thing there with the trainer for a number of these fighters on this card here, of course. And this is going to be, it's still going to be a pretty good card, for people, fight fans to enjoy. It's just that, given what happened there with Janibek Alhamdulillah, that kind of like, gets, it's pretty much like a downer there a little bit on that. You know what I mean? So you do have that. But catch up, with all of the conversations I had with, like I said, Ben Johnson, Coach Bob Santos, who has, there with Erislan De Lara, with Isaac Lucero, with Luis the Twitch Nunez. Of course, he's going to have those guys in there in the ring. You know what I mean? So that's a lot to, kind of like go through there for this particular fight card. So definitely looking forward to it. Like I said, I'm leaning towards Lamont Roach Jr. for the win. Now, the one for Shockey Foster and Stephen Fulton, I'm still undecided on that. I'm still like up in the air, given, the background there of course, Stephen Fulton being a multi-division world champion, only having a loss to Naoya Inoue, being able to, be unified at 122, win the WBC title at 126, now going after Shockey Foster there at 130. Now with Shockey Foster, of course, he was able to, win the WBC Super Featherweight Championship, have a couple of defenses of it before losing to Robeson Conceição by split decision in a fight that I felt like there was no way that Robeson Conceição won that fight in Newark last July. No way. There was absolutely no way that he won that fight. But they ended up giving him the split decision. They had the rematch, and Shockey Foster won that particular rematch. And now he's going up against Stephen Fulton here in a key belt within the super featherweight division, defending that WBC belt. So, like I said, I think that one is an absolute coin flip. You do have also, as I mentioned there, with the interim WBC middleweight title on the line with Shane Mosley Jr. versus Jesus Ramos Jr. Of course, Jesus Ramos had a couple of fights this year. One that was on February 1st, and then he had like another fight that was within the next month. I mean, it was like absolutely crazy that he was able to get, those kind of like back-to-back fights that soon. But he was able to do that here when he had his win over Jason Rosario, and then at the end of March against Guido Sram, right? And both of those fights were, a little bit above 154 pounds. So that's why now he's competing against Shane Mosley Jr. for the interim WBC middleweight championship. And, we had a conversation there with Shane Mosley Jr. as well. That is on the YouTube channel. So you'll be able to, check that out there where Shane Mosley, talks about, getting himself ready for this bout. And even though, at the time, he would have had something where if he gets a win, he could kind of like state his case to fight the winner of Erislandy Lara versus Janibek, but since Janibek ain't there no more, now I have to see if he will get something with Erislandy Lara if he gets this win over Jesus Ramos Jr. It said, do you think Fulton will make weight? He looked overweight a while back, during the presser. Now I think he should be able to make weight. Now I don't know. I may talk with a couple people that were in attendance for the public workout that happened earlier. Earlier today, as far as like wherever you're at, as far as like time is concerned, because it's at the midnight Thursday here on the East Coast, but it hasn't hit midnight yet in San Antonio. So there you go on that. But I think that Fulton should be able to make weight or something like that, especially given that this is a big fight for him here for this super featherweight championship. Now, given what was the whole circumstance behind this particular fight, some people felt like, hey, maybe it could have happened in the summer. Then they thought it was going to happen on October 25th. Then it didn't happen. So now here it is, December 6th. So it's been about, these guys have been in and out of camp for at least, 5 months. So it's going to be something to see what happens in this particular fight, because it's one thing to kind of like be in regular schedule preparing for a fight and being in camp, but it's another thing to have a camp, then not have a fight, then going back in camp and then not having a fight, and then you got to get back into it again, and there it is, right? This is kind of different than I think what we had here with Shane Mosley and Jesus Ramos or whatever it was. So, hey, I'm like, well, those guys have been in camp for a little bit and then had to reschedule, but it is not like this thing here with Stephen Fulton and O'Shaquie Foster. But we've seen all the stuff that's been going on between those two guys, whether it's on different podcasts or press conferences or anything like that. These guys really are looking at it like, all right, I want to get this thing on and done and get it over with. And we're gonna see who the better fighter is on that. But as I was mentioning there with the odds, absolutely even pretty much between the two. So if y'all trying to get in on something, I don't know what the good move would be on it for that. I think they had O'Shaquie Foster, they're at like minus 122 over at FanDuel and minus 125 over at Caesar Sportsbook. So yeah, it's not really much where you could gain off of that if you're trying to put down on something with that. You feel me? But yeah, that's overall what's going on with that fight card. Like I said, you're gonna have probably fights. See if they'll have fights on YouTube. Then you got PBC on Prime, and then the 4 fights that are gonna be on pay-per-view there for that, right? I think there's something else that's going on this weekend. We should have, I think, if I'm not mistaken, we should have Jai Opataya in action as well. Yep. He's going to be defending his IBF Cruiserweight title against Hussein Sankara over in, it should be in what? Australia or something like that. Yeah. So he's going to be defending his IBF title in Australia. And, they were talking about, him and potentially having a fight with Zurdo Ramirez, but, they had the thing announced for Zurdo to face David Benavidez in May of next year. So they've had like a number of things that they were talking about when it came to Jai Opataya and Zurdo Ramirez. So first, Opataya got to take care of business here, defending the IBF title, and then after that, then we could see if he could maybe unify with the other world champion that's in there in the cruiserweight division in Badu Jack. I don't even think that's going to happen. But that kind of like tells you like what's there in store for this weekend. So y'all look forward to all of that. Of course, we had the whole news about finally, Teofimo Lopez versus Shakur Stevenson for January 31st. Okay. A number of people will look forward to that. There is going to be a little bit more that may be added to it because, if I'm not mistaken, I did see something in reference to a fighter that is another interim champion in the WBC, and Bruce Carrington. And he said that he would be back in the ring in January 31st. I'm not seeing it to the point where it's going to be on that card with Xander Zayas and Abbas Barao over in Puerto Rico, because I don't think that's like as far as I know, I don't think that's a top rank, completely a top rank type of event where they'll have like TV coverage and all that type of stuff. So I don't think Bruce Carrington is going to be involved with that fight card. I think he's going to be involved in the one here that has Teofimo Lopez defending the WBO and Ring Magazine titles as super lightweight against Shakur Stevenson. Okay, so be on the lookout for that. Now, as far as my thoughts on that, I said it, there on Monday when they kind of like made that announcement. Yeah, it's a good fight. Some people say it's like a good fight. You're gonna have Shakur Stevenson being at 140 pounds for his first fight, and it's going to be against, some would say, the top fighter at 140 pounds. Now, given the names behind it, yeah, it seems like an intriguing fight. But one fighter is at 135, another fighter is at 140, and neither of them have been able to angle for a unification, particularly Teofimo Lopez. Teofimo Lopez is the longest reigning champion at 140 pounds. Yes, I know about all the titles changing hands, particularly with the WBA. Like I said, Isaac Cruz was a world champion. Then it was Rayo Valenzuela, and now it's Gary Antoine Russell. Okay, you have that. You have the whole thing with the WBC, right? You had, Subriel Matias that was able to win it. You know what I mean, from Alberto Puello. And we just talked about the whole thing with Subriel Matias right now, and if they're still going to have him fighting Dalton Smith in January, or the first, pretty much the first couple of weeks of January, right? The IBF belt, that's out there. You got a guy, Richardson Hitchens, that was able to win the title. He had his defense against George Kambosos Jr., and he has the same manager as Teofimo Lopez, but hey, they ain't looking to do anything as far as like fighting each other. So why is it that Teofimo Lopez isn't able to unify here in the super lightweight division, but yet he's going to have this fight against Shakur Stevenson? And yeah, while they're rated around there in the pound for pound rankings and that type of stuff, it's like, this is almost like one of those fights. It's like, as they say, create a fight. Or like, you have create a player in NBA 2K or NBA Live or something like that. This is almost like create a fight, because what's the backstory behind this? Like, there's no backstory. There's no like internal rivalry between the two fighters or anything like that. It's just something that says like, hey, we got, Shakur Stevenson that, he was doing this thing here in the lightweight division. And you got, Teofimo Lopez that's been doing his thing in the super lightweight division. Let's just have these two guys fight each other. But hey, it is what it is. We'll see how it's going to be built up here within these next few weeks, because you're going to have these press conferences out there. There's going to be something coming up with it, and we'll see how it goes, right? But yeah, I'm like, I think we could have had more for Teofimo Lopez at super lightweight. We could have had more for Shakur Stevenson at lightweight. Both of these guys have honored their mandatory defenses within their division. They could have did something in order to angle for either unification or a high-profile fight within the division, but not whatever. Yeah, it says when they had the face off, standing side by side, Shakur looks way bigger than Tio. Hey, I mean, maybe you have something where Stevenson, at this point of his, professional career, he's, pretty much on a different, what I say, height or whatnot. But they should be listed around the same height. It's just that the frame might be different. The frame for Shakur Stevenson might be different than Teofimo Lopez. Now, initially, tailor the tape, they got Teofimo as a taller fighter listed, but they have around the same reach at 68. But for my thing is, I think that given Teofimo Lopez's fights against Sandor Martin, right, and then after that, his fight against Jermaine Ortiz, where guys that don't necessarily take the lead, he has issues with those guys. Okay, so when you have something like that, that's a problem for Teofimo Lopez. And given what Shakur Stevenson has done in his past couple of fights, it could be a real problem here for Teofimo Lopez. I think with Shakur Stevenson, as long as I think it might be something like what we may have saw on last a couple of weeks ago when you saw Devin Haney versus Brian Norman Jr. Okay, you saw someone that was technically much better than a fighter that has had a lot of momentum going into that bout in Brian Norman Jr., but didn't have the technique or the skill set to keep up with the Devin Haney. Teofimo Lopez does have a good background, amateur background, pretty good amateur background, and that type of stuff. But is he able to be technically sound enough to keep up with someone like a Shakur Stevenson? I'm not sure about all that. But we got about 8 weeks or so before that fight's supposed to take place, and we'll be able to find out on that front. All right. So that's mainly what I have. Like I said, from earlier today or whatever it was, Terence Crawford saying what he said in reference to the WBC. We're gonna hear more about that, later on down the line, whether it's the WBC or these other sanctioning bodies. You might hear from the WBO about it. We might hear from the WBA about it probably within the next few weeks. They're supposed to have their convention in Orlando, Florida. I think it's from the 13th to the 17th or something like that. So you'll have something from the WBA. You might hear something from the IBF. Now, remember, the thing, too, with the WBO, what it was, a couple of weeks ago, a few weeks ago or so, WBO had something over in Puerto Rico or whatever it is, and Terence Crawford was all there. He was all, as they say, all up in the videos, dancing on stage and all that type of stuff. And then now you see what's going on with the WBC, and it's like, ooh, that's wow, crazy work. You feel me? But like I said, you're gonna hear from these sanctioning bodies. You're gonna hear from people within Ring Magazine. You're gonna probably hear from Turkey Al-Sheikh in reference to this. So I think it's gonna really be something to follow here over the next couple of weeks, right? And then, of course, you have the fight card in San Antonio, Texas. It might be, some say it'd be favoritism, but I just think it's a bad style matchup there for Isaac Cruz against Lamont Roach Jr. And I got Lamont Roach Jr. Getting the win. And you might, depending on what happens within those first 4 rounds or so, you might see Isaac Cruz kind of, resort to a few things here and there. But it's going to be something. You're going to have, these two fighters up against each other. I think that, of course, you got Lamont Roach Sr. in the corner there for Lamont Roach Jr. And you're going to have the father for Isaac Cruz going to be in the corner there as well. So it's going to be a really good style clash for that particular fight. And then, of course, you have the thing there, WBC Super Featherweight Championship on the line. O'Shaquie Foster versus Stephen Fulton. You'll have talked with, of course, Coach Ronnie Shields there yesterday. Of course, they had a great host there, Joseph Heron, on there, and they say that might be a bad style matchup. Like how we were talking about if we had Arislandi Lara versus Janibek Alhamdulillah, we might be seeing the same thing here with those Shaki Foster and Stephen Fulton, or it could be a great technical matchup between the two. Now, I said, given the build up to this fight, that it could be like a fight of the year potential, but it just depends on the styles with both of those guys to see if it actually, lives up to the hype that they built up for it. Right. And then you got the thing there with Shane Mosley Jr. versus Jesus Ramos. Jesus Ramos, as I said, was bouncing from like being at 158, 159 or so. They're going up against Jason Rosario, and then against Guido Sram, he was back around at 155, 154. Now he's competing here against Shane Mosley Jr. Of course, it had that win over Daniel Jacobs there that was above 160 pounds, right? But he's kind of floated around the middleweight division to see like where he could contend there around middleweight. But scoring that win over Daniel Jacobs last year was key there for him. But other than that, like we hadn't heard much from him since like 2023. Like he had 4 fights, or well, excuse me, 3 fights in 2023, and just that 1 fight against Daniel Jacobs in 2024. So this is like an extended amount of inactivity here for Shane Mosley Jr. It would be 17 months that he hasn't been in the ring in comparison to Jesus Ramos Jr., who had 2 fights within, like I said, about 8 weeks. So that's going to be something right there. All right. So that's what to look forward to, on Saturday. Should be a great night of fights there over in San Antonio. I was hoping I could make it out there, but nah, I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. And then, of course, what's going to be happening the following week over in Miami, Florida. So we're going to be talking about that here on the Boxing Source channel as well. Big ups for everyone that's been listening live, whether it's through YouTube or through Rumble. Yes, we are available on Rumble. And we're going to see if we could get a few things sorted out as far as like scheduling interviews too here on this channel here before the close of the year. And I have to see when I'll schedule the whole thing with the Boxing Source Award Show for 2025. We're going to have that thing sorted out before the end of the year. It's probably, going to be after the fights that's taking place in Riyadh on December 27th. Of course, Nayo Inoue is going to be defending his undisputed titles there at 122. You're going to have Junto Nagatani on that card as well. So if they both win their fights, then they're looking to have the fight against each other next year over in Japan or whatever it is. So you're gonna have that's gonna be happening. You got Kenshiro Taraji on that card. You're gonna have Hayato Susumi on the card and Raito Susumi on the card. So it's something there, as they say, Night of the Samurai, the Ring 5. It's December 27th. But after that, it's probably going to be December 28th that I'm going to have the Boxing Source Award Show. So I'm going to do that. All right. So y'all see what it is. All right. With that being said, y'all, I will catch you later. Peace out.